Hi everyone, today we're doing a grain to glass video for a brew recipe I call the Craft Euro Gold. So I'm just weighing out the grains here on my wife's kitchen scales that I pinched. I'll pop the recipe up on the screen so you can take a look at that. For the grains we're using ale malt, German Pilsner and Vienna. Hops we're using Hallertau Traditional, yeast 2 packets of Nova Lager, and we'll pop in there some yeast nutrients and 2 tabs of Wellflock. So after those grains have been weighed, get the grain mill out. Got a 2-roller grain mill, and I've set these rollers about a credit card width apart. Not sure if that's 100% perfect, but has been okay so far. Now just chuck the trusty Ryobi drill on the end there, because I am definitely not doing this by hand. Now it's time to pour in those grains. Let me know in the comments if you think this is over crushed. I'm still learning about this part, so I'm interested to hear your feedback on that. So here's a close-up once I've finished crushing the grains. Yeah, let me know if you think that's overdone. I'm still not 100% sure. I do recommend getting one of these hose attachments from Bunnings. It's a life changer. And grab yourself one of these water filters. This will just help filter out any nasties out of that tap water. For this recipe, I need to put 42 litres into my 65 litre Brewzilla boiler. And for the sparging water, I'm putting 25 litres in the 35 litre Brewzilla. I won't use all that sparging water, but I just make more than what I'm going to use just in case something goes wrong. To reach my desired water profile, I'm putting roughly 6 grams of these 3 salts in. And I'll weigh that out using my trusty little scales. And if you want to know the water profile coming out of your tap, I recommend getting online and checking out your local water resource, and they should have all the information on there, and you can just punch that into Brewfather and it'll calculate for you. And I found the best bang for buck was this little salt starter kit from Kegging. Because I don't have a 15 amp power socket in my house, I have to use a 10 amp to 15 amp adapter. Doesn't mean I can run 15 amps, but it lets me plug in a 15 amp power socket, and it limits how much power I can use out of the 65 litre Brewzilla. Setting my strike temp to 72 degrees, and you can see here I can only use 2 out of the 3 power options here. This means it takes a little bit longer to reach the temps I'm going for. Once I hit the strike temp of 72, I bump that down to 68 and it's time to start mashing. Now I'm just pouring the grains in slowly here and giving it a good stir so I don't get dough balls. And dough balls are clumps of grain that don't break down properly, so you lose efficiency if you don't break those down properly. So just taking my time here and making sure it's mixed in real good. So now I've got that last bit of grain in there. It's starting to turn into a thick porridge-like substance. It's not too hard to mix, and that's kind of the sweet spot I want to sit there. If it got a little too thick, I'd have to add in some water. But this is the consistency that I'm going for here, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'm just putting on the recirculating arm, and this recirculates the wort from the bottom of the boiler onto the top of those grains. And that recirculation helps with the mashing process, in theory giving us a higher efficiency. So once you have all that hooked up, every 15 minutes we'll give this a stir. And I'm just lifting off the grains that have sunk to the bottom of the mash tun and potentially catching any dough balls I might have missed. One thing I did find with this Brewzilla setup is if I'm splashing the recirculating wort around, this little bracket here comes loose sometimes, so I just hold on to it because that wort starts going everywhere. That's a sticky mess no one wants to clean up. So 30 minutes into the mash, it's time to fire up the HLT or sparging water, and I'm setting that to 78 degrees. With these double batches, the mash tun can get quite heavy, so I recommend setting up one of these little pulley systems. One final mix before it's time to take out that recirculating arm. Again, this mash tun can get heavy, so I don't think I could do this if I didn't have this pulley system. Now to get the water from the HLT to the top of that mash tun, I've just got some silicone tube with a 1/2 inch Type E cam lock fitting. And that'll pump the water straight to the top of that mash tun. Now I'm setting the 65 litre Brewzilla to maximum heat to start the boiling process. And I'm going to sparge this grain till I hit my target liquid, which is 55 litres. After that sparge, it's much lighter now. You can just lift it up. No assistance required with this lift. So before we get to the rolling boil, we'll just take a sample here and put it on the refractometer to get a reading of the gravity. I tried to get fancy here and show you what it looked like inside, but it just didn't work for me. I'm going to pop the lid on here just so we can get to that rolling boil a little bit quicker. And now's a good time to throw in that hop spider. Once you've hit that rolling boil, time to set the timer for 1 hour. But we will also set timers for the hop additions. 15 minutes into the boil, we'll put our first hop addition, and for this recipe it's 64 grams of hallertau. At the 30-minute mark, add our second hop addition, which is 50 grams hallertau. And at the 45-minute mark, the third hop addition, 20 grams hallertau. We'll also put in 2 well-flock tablets and the yeast nutrients. Once the boil's completed, it's time to take a post-boil gravity reading. Now it's time to cool down that wort and get it into the fermenter. I'm using Kegland's plate heat exchanger, where we run tap water through the in and out on one side and we run the wort through the in and out on the other side. And with this, it depends on the speed you run the wort to how much it will get cooled down. It's a fairly warm day today, so to get to my 26 degrees that I'm aiming for, I think I'll have to run the pump speed at about 75%. If it was a cooler day, I could run it 100% and get down to about 25, 26 degrees. So I usually just run a little bit out first, mainly to pump any shit that's left in there and to grab a quick temperature reading. Don't be an idiot like me and forget to turn the hose on before you take your temperature. So when you're happy with all that, give the fermenter a good spray with some sanitizer. Now it's time to start pumping that wort into the fermenter. While that's pumping away, it's a good time to spray down those packets of yeast and the scissors. As I mentioned earlier, I'm using Nova Lager as the yeast, and I find this is a really good yeast for a fast fermentation. I've popped the flavor profile on the screen there so you can see it's a very neutral flavor. Fairly neutral with a touch of red apple in there. Now I like to add the yeast in as the fermenter's filling, because with all that oxygen that's getting pumped around, gives the yeast the best chance at doing its job. So 2 packets in and we're at the 44 litre mark. Time to get this into the fridge. But before we do that, we have to drop the rat pill in so we can keep a reading and make sure we're tracking well over the next couple of days. Now with this pressure fermenter, I like to keep the spunding valve at about 10 psi. We're going to aim to ferment this at about 18 degrees. So you can see here on this graph that we've gone from a gravity of 1051 to a gravity of 1026 in a matter of 2 days, so we're tracking really good here. So on this graph here you can see we plateaued on the Thursday. We weren't really losing many gravity points, so Friday decided to cold crash so we could keg this on the Saturday. For the kegging process, I had the CO2 bottle, the filter and the keg. Time to pop that spunding valve and connect our CO2 to the fermenter. Then we run the beer line from the filter into the fermenter. We pop this release valve on the gas side of the keg. Just make sure that's tightened all the way in before you pop that on the keg. Then we run the beer line from the filter into the keg and crank up that CO2 to 1 bar. Now slowly release that release valve till you can hear a slight hissing sound. So we're pumping CO2 into the fermenter's pumping beer into the filter's and pumping into the keg. Now you can track how fast your keg's filling by the condensation on the side of the keg here. And once you see beer going to that release valve, it's time to pop it and throw the next keg on. I usually can't wait for my beers to properly carbonate, so I force carbonate them, which involves setting the CO2 bottle to 3 bar, popping the gas line onto the gas valve on the keg, and rolling it on the floor for 2 minutes. Now once you've done that, I suggest just releasing a little bit of that gas out and then throwing it into your kegerator. I roughly pour out about half a cup just to make sure there's no crap sitting at the bottom of the keg. And as you can see here, this beer came out pretty clear. Very happy with this result. Now I will work on other grains I could put in there to help with head retention, but for 7 days, very happy with this result. So thanks for watching. I'd love to hear any feedback you guys have. I'd appreciate any advice or tips or tricks that I may have missed out on. But thank you for hanging out with me and making this 7-day grain to glass Euro Gold craft beer.